Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Yes, I'm back. I know it's been like 2-3 weeks or something now. Basically what happened is I was on holiday for about a week, and obviously I wasn't going to be filming any content there because I was relaxing. I then got ill whilst on holiday. Then I got so ill that basically I got run down, and I have been cold now for about a week and I've done absolutely nothing. So a big thing that people don't really know about me, or I might have mentioned it before in videos, is that I don't actually read to relax. I often read, well, I read to relax when I go to bed, but when I want to relax, I don't sit down and read. I sit and game, or I watch telly, or do something that's mindless, where I don't really have to think. Therefore, I did no reading the past week. But in October, I did still get some books done. I know we're now on like the 10th, 11th of November. I'm not sure what the date is today. But I need to do my October reading roundup. I only read 5 books, so this shouldn't take too long, but let's get into it. The 5 books I read in October. So the first book on this list is Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Now, if this is the sequel to Powerless by Lauren Roberts, which was a bit of a TikTok sensation, this was fine. Just the same as Powerless was fine. I think it was a little bit worse than Powerless. There was an element of Powerless, so I was like, yeah, really interesting, really cool. Liked that element. There was a bit at the end of that, especially where I thought, cool, I do want to read the sequel, which is why I then picked this up. I had seen a lot of reviews for this that said that this just really felt like a filler book. It just felt like a load of character, talking, flirting, all this malarkey, couldn't be dealing with it. And that is generally how I feel about this whole book. It's not great, it's not fantastic. It did carry on from where we left off, but didn't then further it anymore. It's like, yeah, that happened. Oh, we're just going to ignore that and we're just going to have them come back together and everything be fine again. And yes, there are some frictions, but it never feels that serious. It never feels like anything's actually deeply going to happen that could worry anybody. It always feels a little bit like they're just here to flirt, they're just here to enjoy each other, they're just here to kind of like get along and that sort of stuff. And it just really felt like there was no stakes at any point where it was like, well, what's the point? Why would I care that any of this is happening? Very, very slow, very, very dull. This is unfortunately falls into that romantasy genre where it's not good romance and it's not good fantasy. It's just a woman lusting over a man, and yeah, it was just all a little bit cringe. There is some dialogue in here that I do enjoy. You can tell this is written by somebody who's actually young, somebody who does actually know how to have a conversation with another human being. It does feel quite natural, and that element I do like. That there's still a lot of cringy lines, there's still a lot of kind of like one-liners where you think, if I heard somebody say that in real life, my whole body would cringe and I would like burn into flames. If I ever said it, I would equally feel like that. Suffers from that, but if you enjoyed the first one, you may find something to enjoy in this one. A little less plot in this one, a lot more kind of just talking, a little less action, but there is, again, at the end, another fantastic twist where you're like, ah, crap, I've got to read the next one now, haven't I? So, yeah, that's Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I'd have probably given this like a 3.75, 3.5 out of 5. The next book is by my favourite author, probably, Brandon Sanderson, and this is Tress of the Emerald Sea. Now, this is a standalone book in, I think, technically the Cosmere, which, if you've never heard of it, Brandon Sanderson, at one point when he was writing his books, decided, actually, these are all set in the same world, so I'm going to announce that, and that was decided to be called the Cosmere. And so, your Mistborn trilogy you may have heard of, the Stormlight Archive, some of the other bigger book series he's written as well, are all kind of within the same universe, and this is as well. Now, what that actually means for plot isn't a lot. There is a character in here who is this kind of god-like magical creature who does refer to other planets and other places and other universes and stuff like that, so that's quite cool. Other than that, it doesn't mean anything else. But Tress of the Emerald Sea focuses on Tress when one boy that I think she kind of has a crush on, since she goes missing in the night, and we find out he's been taken at sea and she has to go off to the sea. The island she comes from is very small, very kind of like, I don't know, specific, unique, that's very kind of shut off from the rest of the world. And so when she goes out to sea, a lot is kind of expanded to her. There's also a difference to the type of person she is to the people that she meets on the ship that she ends up getting involved in, and therefore creates this kind of dynamic of, well, we've never thought of it that way, we've never thought of it this way, and that's kind of what Tress is all about, or Tress of the Emerald Sea is all about. It's a really kind of like heartwarming book. I wouldn't say it's Brandon's greatest work. I think that it's fantastic. You've got your humour, your usual Brandon Sanderson humour in here. You've got your kind of high stakes, but there's also an element of it where it didn't feel quite as high stakes as usual. And also because there was no series to this, it felt like once everything was finished, it felt a little bit complete. And I know that sounds very dull, or very odd, but I struggle with fantasy, which essentially I think this probably is, because it talks of things that are fantastical elements. But when fantasies are standalones, I really struggle with them because I think, well, I need more. The first book in a fantasy series is never so amazing you don't need anything else. And that's what I'm kind of trying to say with this. It wasn't so amazing that I don't feel like I need anything else. It's good enough that I feel like I could have done with a series of this. But in general, very, very good. Really, really enjoyed it. It's got Brandon Sanderson's very typical writing, where it's very, very approachable, but also kind of mysterious at the same point. He introduces these kind of, I don't really want to spoil it, but he introduces something within the book that you can expand upon. It's kind of like a new science. He likes to kind of put scientific elements, like hypothetical sciences, into his books, where he says, okay, if this thing existed, in theory it could have all these different variations, and that could mean this. And that's what happens in this book, and I love it. I love that. I think Tress was brilliant. There's another character in here who's got kind of comedic, and there's a few characters in here who are quite comedic. I feel like this was aimed at a slightly younger audience than maybe his Stormlight Archive and maybe the Mistborn trilogy, that sort of stuff. So maybe if you're getting into fantasy, this would be a great way to go as well. But do ready yourself for some fantastical elements. This isn't romantasy. This isn't, oh, it's just set in a castle, but realistically it's just a generic story. There is stuff in here that will push your imagination, that will push you to think outside of our reality and what we understand as kind of science, that sort of stuff. Loved it. Think it's brilliant. If you've read other Brandon Sanderson stuff, I'd still recommend this. Also, the front cover is stunning, so that's another thing to add it to your bookshelf. So that's Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I think I'd probably give this a 4.25 out of 5 stars on my Storygraph, Goodreads and Fable now, which is something new I'm on. The next book is The Less Year by C.K. Oldfield. Now, this was a book that was actually really kindly sent to me by somebody over on Instagram who essentially said, I'm on to the second book. This series is amazing. Please, can I send you the first one so you read them? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll happily read books that people send to me. So The Less Year actually took me a minute to kind of understand what was going on. I read all of this. None of this was audiobooks, so that's probably why it took me like a month, because I actually rarely sit down to physically read. As I said, I don't do it to relax. I listen to audiobooks to feel productive. Anyway, took me a while to get to understand what a less year is. Now, essentially, The Less Year, in hypothetical theory, is a futuristic book set in a dystopian world where humanity has kind of ended. There are some humans kind of rolling around. They have many kind of civilizations still. And the less year is once a year, trade is not allowed or stops or something. I'm not quite sure as to what the rule is or when it begins. But essentially that's what happens. Trade is no longer allowed. This causes people to start pillaging, to start robbing people and killing people for things. And it's horrible, and it happens like once every 20, 25 years. You're not given an actual first name until you've been through your first year. So the whole main character we focus on is a chap called Boy, because he's just a boy. And the general plot of this first one is the boy is quite young. He went through something dark when he was young. And his parents are still alive, and they're kind of introducing him to the world, and they're saying to him, okay, you're going to have to ready yourself for a less year. The less year is announced. They start training him. They get him ready. And then all hell basically breaks loose. And what is massive about this book is that, like, the actual author is not afraid to pull punches. He wasn't afraid to just kill off random people, kill people you thought were main characters, be like, oh yeah, they're gone now, be like, oh yeah, this happens. At one point I did feel like there was a lot of death. At one point I did feel like he was just killing people left and right, and I was like, is there actually any plot going on here, or is it just, oh, this person's here, there's another way to die, oh, this person's turned up, there's another way to die. It felt like that a little bit, but either way, I was really kind of hesitant at the start, but then it kind of does find its footing and does find its direction, starts to ask some questions. And the big questions I think around this are, if we did end up in a dystopian world where humanity had to kind of write its history, rewrite itself again, what kind of person would you want to be in that environment? And that's what's asked in this book. And I ended up really enjoying it. I ended up thinking, holy crap, it's like Fallout. I felt kind of Fallout-y in that everything's really dangerous out there. Everything's kind of barren. You kind of survive by yourself. Everybody's out there to kind of potentially kill you. There's very few nice people around, that sort of thing. Really, really enjoyed it in the end. I didn't think I was going to when I first started it, but I definitely do want to pick up the second book at some point. I don't know when. Maybe if somebody bought me the second one, I'd be forced to read it. That wasn't a hint. It's just really like this. So I'll probably give this a 4.25 out of 5 stars. That's The Less Year by C.K. Oldfield. If you've never heard of it before, I definitely go check it out. It's really, really interesting. The penultimate book on this list is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is actually the first time I've ever said that out loud, I think. Clara and the Sun was a very interesting book. Now, I listened to it partly on audiobook and I partly read it. This is actually my parents' copy. I don't own this. I saw it on their bookshelf and I'd seen it around somewhere, so I thought I'd pick that up, see what it's all about. I had no idea what it was about. Essentially, it's about these robots who people buy to essentially live in their house and be a friend or kind of walk around the house and help things. I don't know. It's kind of like iRobot-y sort of thing. However, the story takes place from the first person point of view of one of these artificial intelligence. They're actually called artificial friends, so AFs. And she is essentially adopted or bought by this family or this mum with a daughter who's quite unwell, and then befriends the daughter, but there's just some really oddities. Like some of the conversations, that's my first thing I kept picking up on. Some of the conversations between people just felt so unnatural. Now, I don't know if this is a translated work, quite possibly. Clearly the author has a name from something that's not English or American, so it could be a translated piece of work. Could have been what caused the odd speech between the characters. It just felt so unnatural. Like, there was no kind of contractions. They wouldn't say wouldn't or couldn't. They'd say could not, would not. And some of the jokes between them, they weren't jokes. They were like really serious. And some of the questions they asked each other were incredibly personal and incredibly upfront and very odd. It just felt incredibly unnatural. A lot of the conversation, as I said, that might just be a translation thing. That might just be kind of, they weren't translated truly into kind of English. They were literal translations or something like that. I don't know. It might be a cultural thing. Who knows? That was my first problem. The other problem was then I was trying to get an idea of where this book was going. Why had they adopted this artificial intelligence? I then started to get the idea that maybe they'd adopted the artificial intelligence to replace this girl. And I was like, that's very, very weird. Why is that a thing? Why is this mum gone, oh yeah, I'm going to buy this artificial intelligence? I never understood as well what they looked like. How tall were they? Could it replace her? And why is it replacing her? Does she want to replace her? I don't know. A lot going on here that I really didn't understand. And at some point it's like, oh, this is what's happening. And then it's like, oh, that's not happened. Let's just talk about something else for a while. And it all felt very odd, very confused by it. Cool front cover, it looks kind of artsy. I don't know, I'm not sure if this is a famous painting. I'm not an artist, I have no idea. But either way, kind of an interesting concept, but I have posted my kind of initial impressions of this on social already. And some people said, yeah, I agree, very, very odd. I'm not quite sure what was going on there. Check it out if it's something you've been interested in, if you're kind of into your science fiction, if you like the idea of reading from the point of view of an artificial intelligence or an artificial robot, who essentially is human, because she's very, very kind of futuristic. But go in and be like, I don't have any expectations here. Because if you have expectations, you're going to be let down, because it just felt like it never really went anywhere. So yeah, I'd probably give this 3.75 or a 4 out of 5. So that's Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. And the final book on this list is an incredibly shiny one. There is My Reflective Light. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Now this is probably by far my favourite book of the month. This is a book that I was very, very kindly sent by a Dr. Martin over on TikTok, who basically said, enjoy it. I love the stuff that you do. Here's a couple of books. He sent me another one that I'm going to read as well called The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is the one that I read, and this is the one that I actually read on holiday. So I took 3 books with me, including The Nightingale, but also another book I've not yet finished, and I will be hopefully in my November reading wrap up. But this is the one I finished whilst I was on holiday. The reason for I managed to finish it is because it was just full of action. There was a lot of intrigue in here. So Dark Matter follows the story of a chap called Jason Dessen, who one day is just living his life, and then is kidnapped, and then he wakes up, and he's no longer in his own life. He's in like this alternative reality. Then without spoiling too much of it, he then has to find his way back to his version of reality. So that's where we are. Now, there are elements of this that were really, really impressive. Loved it. Thought it was cool. Thought there was some twists in here that I thought, well, yeah, obviously that does make sense. If this can happen, then surely that can happen. And that was really well covered, and I enjoyed that very much about it. I also really, really enjoyed Jason and his relationship with his wife, and essentially the story is about him trying to get back to his wife because of how much his version of his wife is the perfect wife for him, and his life is the perfect life for him, etc. You do get some really cool elements as well, where he goes into different kind of like versions of reality and what that could potentially bring, and the different kind of forks that go off into that. Really, really cool. I won't spoil what ends up happening or what kind of ends up happening or what happens in the middle as well, though I have given you a general idea there as to what has happened. Really, really cool concept. Really, really fast paced. There was some bits in the middle that felt a little bit like, okay, we're just filling out pages, or Blake Crouch had some ideas before he was writing it as to what other alternative realities could look like, and he filled those in. I don't know. Either way, the pacing in the middle slowed down a little bit, but I feel like that about a lot of books, really. I feel like a lot of books in the middle are kind of like, right, I've introduced you to the characters, I've introduced you to the concept, you know where we're going, let's slow things down and kind of have some conversations with people and that sort of stuff. But either way, really, really enjoyed it. A lot of fast-paced action goes on in this book, as I said, and there's also an Apple TV series which I've just started, which I'm really, really interested to get into. I think I'm 2 episodes in now as well. Interesting to see how close they've kept to the book, see what bits they've changed, etc. Really, really cool. So that was my first Blake Crouch. Now I've heard some other ones out there that are quite good. One's called Recursion or something like that, which I'm interested to read too. If you've been on the edge about reading a Blake Crouch and Dark Matter and all that sort of stuff, I'd recommend it. It's really, really cool. Easily written. There are some sciencey bits in here where you don't have to understand what's happening to get the plot, But if you do understand a little bit, and if you do read it, and it's explained in a way that if you do properly kind of delve into it and read it, you will understand as to why what happens, that sort of thing. There's also, we're talking hypothetical science here, so I don't think this is actually realistically possible. So what's used here is a, if we could do this, this would be possible sort of thing. So if you're a science person, that's what you're expecting here. Don't expect to find the answer to multiverses. That's Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I would probably give this 4.25, maybe a 4.5 out of 5 stars on my Storygraph on Goodreads. So those are the 5 books I read in October. Now, I didn't read a lot of books this month. I was ill, I was on holiday, I've not been reading a lot, I didn't have a lot of time for audiobooks, etc. But I still read some, so there we go. So, there's Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, The Lessier by C.K. Oldfield, Trust the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, and Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments down below. I need to go blow my nose, and I need to try and pop my ear because I can't hear it on my right ear right now. I'm also going to get myself a Lemsip. I've been supping on a tea rather than the water because I need constant sustenance at the moment. Either way, let me know if you've read any of them. Let me know if there's any on here that you've been like, oh, that sounds interesting, I might pick that one up. Either way, if you've not yet commented, not yet liked, not yet subscribed, bloody do it, okay? And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.